wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Hi everybody, this is Eric Hines, curator of film at Museum of the Moving Image. I want to welcome you to the Reverse Shot Happy Hour as something just fell down behind me. We're off to a bang today. I want to welcome to the Reverse Shot Happy Hour. If you've joined us before, thanks for coming back. If this is your first time, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the support that you've given over these months to the museum in terms of our online programming. We are excited about today's program. We've got some great guests, and I'm going to bring on our hosts in a second. But again, I want to sort of thank any of you who've been able to help us out over these months in terms of our online programming. We're relying on donations for doing programs of this nature, and we're also really encouraging you to become a museum member if you aren't already. Though we can't get back into the museum at the moment, we are continuing to do programming in this space. And plan to continue to bring programming back in the building. So there's still a benefit to becoming a museum member, discounts on virtual cinema, as well as some extra perks and events that we'll be doing just for members. So please keep that in mind and welcome you to become part of our community. This community that we've gathered here on Fridays is something I look forward to every week. And I want to, at this point, bring on our esteemed hosts for the Reverse Shot podcast, the editors and founders of Reverse Shot, Michael Koresky and Jeff Reichert, and our longtime contributor and filmmaker, Farihah Zaman.
I don't know why Jeff thought it was funny that you called us esteemed.
I mean, I can't even.
Something fell down behind me right when we started. I don't know if
Yeah, no, we all heard it. It was really loud.
It was embarrassing for you, but we love having you around. So
I'm not embarrassed at all. I'm very proud.
What was it that fell, Eric?
Probably one of my props.
But you could look behind you and see what it is right now.
I was trying to be cool about it. Let's see.
Why did you ask him this, Jeff? Now we'll never know.
if it makes you feel better, yeah, that was a good question.
That was worth it.
Okay, I'm glad we found
Right before you brought my camera back, this is what I looked like, because I just almost spilled this entire drink all over myself. So just that kind of a day.
What's going on today? I don't want to jinx it.
I wish you all luck for the hour.
So I'm in solidarity with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that intro, Eric, as always.
You're welcome.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. I don't know. Feels like...
I don't like to complain about the heat because I continue to be grateful that we are able to go outside and to be in this particular season, if in a pandemic. But if you hear the fan, I've been told on phone calls and Zooms that it sounds like I'm in a wind tunnel, and that's because I need it to be on me constantly at all times.
I don't hear anything.
Okay. Yeah, don't mind sweat, shine, or a slight breeze. It's just a necessity.
I feel like this whole thing is getting a little old. Quarantining, not the happy hour.
I was about to say the Reverse Shot Happy Hour. You're quitting?
That's possible. No, I think I was pretty cool with this for a little while. No, I'd like to be somewhere else.
Well, I find what's tough is that like I find myself trying to repress expressing the things that I miss because it sounds so petty out loud at times when you think about like in the context of loss of life and the way in which people are grieving and human suffering. And it's like, well, I have food to eat and I have a home and I'm grateful for that. But yeah, there's moments in this like cycling emotional loop where you're like, I just want to fucking see my friends. You know, one of the things that I loved about the work of the two guests we're going to have on is that they describe familiar spaces or convey familiar spaces in ways that aren't just about the sort of glamorous bits. Like there's these descriptions of like stale, acrid cigarette smoke and all these things that you don't particularly like, but it makes up the atmosphere so much that you miss it when it's not available to you. Like I had the thought last night, I miss the smell of other people's sweat in a small space where everybody's dancing. Like I miss that feeling that like, ugh, everybody's on me, that I've never particularly thought of as what I appreciate about being at a dance club or something. But like, that's all I can think about in like sticky New York summer days.
I think
Yeah.
I talked about this on an earlier show, but I'll say it again here because I think it's appropriate. It's like I would never normally go to the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn and order a huge cheeseburger and eat it during a movie. It's just like not my thing. I don't like eating during movies and stuff. But for whatever reason, in these last few weeks, I've just been thinking about like how wonderful that would be to just go buy a ticket for a movie, some movie, any movie, and then just like eat a burger there. And again, I would never normally do this, but it's just like something about the inability to do almost anything that is bringing out these weird desires, I think.
And sometimes the places we're fondest of are not even the ones that are necessarily like the best in some objective way. Like everybody, New Yorkers love the Court Street Theater. And it's not because everything runs smoothly. One time, Jeff and I had to leave like Water for Elephants because somebody pulled the fire alarm. So I'll never know what happened at the end because I'm not going to watch the rest of it.
Can I just say I like how you combine two titles there, Like Water for Chocolate and Water for Elephants. Movie called Like Water for Elephants.
Like Water for Chocolate is a much better movie.
It's also a much better title. I have not seen Water for Elephants. I remember Like Water for Chocolate. I wanted to say quickly before we bring on our first guest, that one little trick that I've been doing with myself lately so I don't feel too terrible about the things that I miss is I try to convince myself of all the things that I don't miss and all the things that I really, really hated when and disliked when the world was normal and the way that it was. So, I just think about like all the things that actually annoyed me about going to the movies, all the things that really annoyed me about going to bars, all the things that annoyed me about going to restaurants, all the things that annoyed me. And while it's an exercise and I actually really do miss those things, it can be extremely helpful to think about all the things that used to make me want to just be antisocial and sit in my apartment with the blinds closed and the doors locked all the time anyway.
A Misanthrope's Guide to Surviving the Pandemic by Michael Koresky.
Just go back and remember all the times it sucked. That'll be very helpful during a time like this. So yes, Farihah sort of mentioned a little bit the theme that we're going to be talking about today, which ties together our guests pretty nicely, which is, you described it as places where everyone knows your name, which is a really nice tie-in to, of course, our Cheers opening theme song. People were here for the opening.
And not unintentionally.
Not unintentionally. Bill and Turner Ross, whose new movie Bloody Nose Empty Pockets is available actually to stream through the Museum of the Moving Image. It's an absolutely terrific movie that takes place over the course of one long night, which is the last night of a bar. So the bar is on its way out, and you kind of just sit with the denizens of the bar and you kind of get to know them and feel them and just be there with them. And it's such an incredible tonic right now. And they're going to be on soon. And then our first guest, Beatrice Loayza, who's been writing for Reverse Shot for some time now, wrote a really terrific piece about the closing of the Uptown Theater, which is a pretty major movie theater. Some might call a palace, even 800 plus seating in Washington, D.C., which is where Beatrice lives. It's actually a place where 2001: A Space Odyssey had its world premiere, which at first I didn't believe, but turns out to be completely true.
It was the world premiere there?
World premiere, but I should wait until it was on. I'm jumping the gun. So these two things got us thinking about places that are closed, places that we can't access, and that used to be great meeting places. And where we are right now in this room is sort of taking the place of the meeting place. But let's bring on Beatrice, who is sitting out there in the dark.
We know your name, Beatrice. Get up here.
Hello.
Hi.
Beatrice Loayza. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think it's so funny that you didn't believe me when I pitched you saying that 2001: A Space Odyssey premiered at the Uptown.
Like New Yorkers are really snobs, as are Los Angelinos, and we think that when there are world premieres, they only happen on the coast.
I mean, I didn't believe it either. I mean, why would it premiere there? It's like a nothing neighborhood, especially now. It's like nothing really goes on there. So,
Do you have any context for why they picked there as opposed to anything? Does that have anything to do with like the proximity to the Smithsonian, aerospace, anything like that? I mean, it seems so inexplicable.
No, I mean, I think just like when it was constructed, there were several other sort of palace type movie theaters in DC that were closer to downtown. And I mean, those all just kind of shut down or were renovated, or and Uptown just kind of kept its facade and for whatever reason just remained one of those retro looking theaters. But no, it's not next to anything really. It's, like I said, a residential community mostly. I mean, there's a lot of rich people around, which I mean, in part is I think why it's lasted for so long, because like even now that it's shut down, I know that there's a petition around that's like making sure that they don't tear down the facade. Because like, you know, regardless if they play movies or not in the future, they don't want to take that from the community, the look of it at least. So that's something.
Well, and not just 2001, but there were other films that you mentioned that had world premieres there. So I think it was sort of a central. I think was Jurassic Park another one? Did I?
Yeah, it was. No, I think location-wise in DC, it's not central, but yeah, I mean it had Jurassic Park, Dances with Wolves. There was some like 2000s films too. Oh God, it had Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, who's on this.
Lion for Lambs.
Oh, yes, right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Robert Redford directed.
Yeah, that premiered at the Uptown as well.
That's the one that they want you to forget.
For people who haven't read the piece yet, Beatrice, I was wondering if you could talk about what makes that theater special to you. And maybe just like, what do you look for in a theater? Like, because I think there's something really ineffable and something that's really difficult to control about spaces that you want to go back to again and again. There's just some like combined magic of factors that we talked about is not exclusively doing things perfectly.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I mean, I returned time and time again to the Uptown because it was so close, but I probably wouldn't have gone there so often if I didn't live right in the neighborhood, because I mean, the movies that they were playing were essentially just big family blockbusters, and the space itself is really not that nice in the interiors. And I think you were saying this earlier in the introduction, just like the idea that you like miss smells and just like the icky parts of like being and like going outdoors and frequenting the world. I mean, like I strangely missed that. And like at the time I was like, man, this is the shittiest theater, but it's the one I'm going to anyway because I love going to the theater. And I don't know, there was like an added layer of ickiness because they were playing blockbusters and because I would travel, you know, to farther away theaters for, you know, the experience of a more substantial movie or a movie that I hold in like a higher regard. Whereas just like the crap was down the street and this rundown, like former glorious place.
I love when you write in the piece about missing, kind of turning your brain off at a blockbuster right now. It's the kind of thing that we used to, yes, take for granted, but also maybe actively feel aggressive or negative towards. Right now, there's something about that kind of mindless sensation in a movie theater that we're all sort of craving, which I think you get at really nicely.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't see all the blockbusters when they come out, but I find that when I do decide to go see a blockbuster, I'm like in a particular mood and it tends to be like that fuck it mood, or like I just need some sort of like, I don't know, mindless relief or like pleasurable relief, but it's not even like a substantial type of pleasure. But yeah, I mean, I still miss it.
And I loved your description of the theater too, because I've been thinking about how we I think in the show have focused a little bit on like the gathering aspect of going to the movies, what it felt like to be near to other people in this like very specific way. But it's not just that, it's like all the stuff around it also, like that becomes part of the ritual. like the garbage that you eat that you'd never eat anywhere else, and like the dinginess of it that you describe because it's like a public space. Like I was talking with someone the other day about how I used to ice skate when I was a little kid, and the primary memory that came up for me, even though I loved ice skating, was like the nachos afterwards. It's like sitting there eating nachos and like goopy cheese and watching people fall down on the ice. And it's like all these other things around it that like make it an immersive, like total full body engagement experience.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting because, you know, when I go to the Uptown all the time, like as I described in my piece, like I was living in a kind of terrible place, which is this group house with a bunch of guys. And like I moved in because I was just desperate to find a place that was cheap.
Yeah.
And that would take me in immediately. And I mean, ultimately, I'm really glad that I lived there because, I mean, I cherish those memories, but I mean, everyone that would come over would kind of like laugh nervously, like, what the fuck? And it was so odd because there was that like contrast with in my house and like my room that wasn't really a room. It was like one wall wasn't really a real wall. So like that, and just like everyone that was living there, and you know the Uptown to an extent too, that was just like just barely holding on to its existence in the area, with, you know, the neighborhood, which was actually really beautiful. Yeah.
Really interesting to think about how, oh, sorry, I was just to think about, like, you know, yes, we talk about movies as releases or escapes or places to go, but because of that, you do sometimes think of particular experiences in the theaters with the places that you lived at the time and the contrast between those. Like, I always think everything I saw the summer of 1999, dates me a little bit, but everything I saw the summer of 1999 is completely related to my living situation in summer 99, which was the only time I ever lived in Jersey City. And I was living in an apartment with a friend, and I was paying $175.
What are you even talking about?
400, I thought that was small.
Yeah, back when that was
in the tri-state area?
$175?
Yeah, wait, you're all in agreement that this is a small amount of money for 1990.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I guess this is 175.
I've paid more to like live in a to like put a mattress down in a lofted living room and barely an apartment in a warehouse in Bushwick. And I felt really proud of myself.
I got what I paid for. There was no air conditioning, and it was like 106 degrees every day. It was the hottest summer on record at that point, or like in 100 years or something. So I was going to the movies. I was getting on the path and going to the movies constantly, and I was seeing everything. I saw Wild Wild West with Will Smith. I saw the John Sayles movie Limbo, which took place in Alaska, and at the Angelica, and it was so cold in the theater, and because it was Alaska, it was probably the most like transcendent movie experience I'd ever had, just because I was in the air conditioning living in Alaska. The Summer of Ice, I shot in Blair Witch Project, and there was a lot of like really great stuff, but I was also seeing like terrible stuff, and it was all like the most amazing thing I've ever done because I was not in my shitty apartment.
Right.
Well, and I feel like for both Michael, both you and Beatrice, it's amazing to watch your faces light up describing films that you don't even particularly like because of how the experience, you said it was transcendent. When was the last time you name dropped Wild Wild West with Will Smith, you know?
Or
with
Limbo. John Sayles probably doesn't remember Limbo.
And this was your face, you know?
John Sayles' Limbo is probably one of the great movie-going experiences of my life, and I don't think it's a good movie at all.
It's not good at all.
Like actually,
I think I saw it at the Angelica that same summer. I came to New York from New Jersey and saw Limbo.
We may have been in the same theater. Oh, people in the audience like Limbo. Okay, we should probably stop.
So much Limbo love going on.
I like this idea of just spaces corresponding to like just eras of your life. And just like what you're talking about, Michael, about like your old place and like the fondness you have for it, and like, you know, my own experiences. You know, when you brought up the theme for this chat, I was immediately just thought of Clute, and you know, that doesn't seem like an immediate like related film, but like I always think about like the last shot when she's clearing out her apartment. And like it's sort of symbolizing her entering like this new phase of her life where she's, I guess, entering into a more straight-laced hetero relationship. But there's like this melancholy to it, even though technically it's better. And I always think of that in relation to, you know, what I perceive as like me improving my situation and my living conditions.
That's interesting. Well, yeah. Well, movies certainly inform, like every move and decision I make is somehow connected to some movie experience that I had. So, I mean, I like well, for example, and we'll get to this more with our next guests who are coming out soon. Like this idea, to go back a little bit to the theme, this idea of, you know, places where you just walk in the door and everybody knows your name and it's just a place to hang out. It's a place to be. I actually feel like movies are just that in general. Like movies that I've seen many, many times. Like I go back to them because I want to hang out with the characters again. Like Farihah and I have a very similar relationship to the movie Home for the Holidays, the Jodie Foster directed Thanksgiving movie. Like we are kind of obsessed with it. And we discovered that one day. We're like, do you love that movie as much as I do? And we've become sort of buddies at home. But like, I want to go back to that movie once a year, not just because it's a holiday thing, because I want to be with the people. I want to enter that world and be with the people. It's very reassuring.
And it's interesting as another film that takes place in almost entirely one space. It's like her childhood home. It is a place outside of, you know, like homes can also serve that purpose when it's not your own. Like when you house sit for somebody and you get to be in this like kind of neutral territory from your own like objects and the relationship that you have with them. And I think like that experience can be replicated in film really well when the family dynamic is explored thoroughly. And that's like, I feel like I know every room of that house, right? Like I love being in that space. I love being in her childhood bedroom, and like there are things that it conveys that are relatable and immediate, even though it's not a kind of like outside space in the way that we're talking about.
Yeah, but it was something I was thinking about earlier, rereading Beatrice's piece and thinking about that was like, there's a kind of interesting dichotomy between our theme about like the familiarity and the places that make us feel comfortable, but like what we often go to the movies for, which is like to see something we haven't seen before. I mean, obviously we do go to see things again, of course, but like, you know, Beatrice, oftentimes when you're going to the Uptown, you're probably going to see some blockbuster that maybe you didn't even care about like 2 weeks prior, but it just happened to be the thing that was there at that time.
I would have never seen half those movies had they not been playing there.
Yeah, so we go to these places that are like, you walk in and they have the smell and they're familiar and it feels good, you know, the seat you like to sit in, but then like what's in front of you is something completely new. And I think that's something really interesting about
What was the last movie you saw there? Oh, sorry. What was the last movie you saw there before it closed?
That's actually a good question, and I wasn't able to figure that out when I was writing the piece. Which I probably would have mentioned. But I do remember one of the last films. Think I was going on like a date with a new person, and I just like convinced him to come see what's it called, the Cloverfield Lane movie, the like John Goodman Cloverfield movie.
Oh yeah.
It was like playing there, and like we had no intention of going to the theaters, and you know, I was just like, well, it looks like this is playing at the Uptown. Why don't we just go see that? Turned out to be, you know, not absolute garbage.
I was gonna say not a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's not a terrible movie, but that was probably one of the last, I don't know, one of the last ones. It's the one I have the like most vivid memory of last being there for.
It's not even, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I moved away before it closed, like a year before. And I don't really think I went back up there.
I was just going to say, it's not, of course, it's not that every commercial or blockbuster film is bad. I think it's that it's hard to tell, like, because the language of trailers is so specific and like ubiquitous that there's just a whole pool. You're like, these are the 5 films in these genres that exist now, and I have no idea. So there's actually a little bit of a thrill, like when you go see something that looks like anything else, horror movie or an action movie, and you're like, I came for the experience of being in the theater. This was actually exciting and good in ways that I was not expecting.
Right. Yeah, I remember there was a stretch of time, I think it was like during the dead period, like after our Oscar seasons, like in March or April, where the theater was playing Beauty and the Beast for like a whole 2 months.
Oh.
And it was like the worst thing for me because I was like, man, am I really going to see this? And I mean, I think I eventually did, but it played it for 2 months. It's like I had no other option. And eventually I just like caved in.
This is that live action, the recent live action.
Yeah.
That was that, as people, readers of our offenses list know, that's especially Lowe's film for me. I truly despise that disgusting thing.
I think I like spaced out the whole time, honestly. I don't remember a thing except
Yeah,
my butt hurt from being in those seats.
We should actually, oh, that's right. I did watch it on a plane. I forgot.
He remembers.
Sweet nightmare.
Thank God your husband is viewing.
Yeah, that's my husband. So we should bring on our next guest, because before we get too deep into the movie thing, we want to talk about the bar thing too, which is extremely important, because Bill and Turner's excellent new movie is set in, like I said earlier, is set in a bar the last day when it's closing. And we won't go into too much more detail. It's a really beautiful film, and we're really happy to have them here. They're the filmmakers. Somebody else might want to jump in, but I know that they've also made really fantastic movies, Chipatulis and Contemporary Color, really great Western.
I never remember the name of the Ohio movie, the zip code movie. I will never. It's 4563.
Oh God, 435. Wait, we should try to guess. 43523. No,
There's no 2 in it.
you have to unmute yourselves. You have to unmute yourselves.
I don't know that anybody wants to have us spend 5 minutes just
Turner,
sharing a random string of numbers.
Turner, do you remember?
Well, when I saw it first said on television, it was 45,365.
That actually helps a lot.
It is. I knew,
Turner,
sir.
Where are you? Is this a movie set? Like, speaking
Yeah.
of special spaces.
Life is a movie. Make your own endings. Yep. I'm in New Mexico.
It's really delightful to see a different landscape in the context of our little boxes. So
What
thank
are you?
for that.
Lee, what are you drinking during this happy hour?
Budweiser.
Never mind. I have to snap open. I'm sorry for the sound. This is just
Sound of happy hour. Here we go.
I'm drinking this
What's everybody got?
Danish liqueur that Jeff
Fantastic.
brought back for me. It's called Gammeldansk. And the best thing about this is that when I opened it, it's because I'd met Jeff, he'd gotten back from a trip, gave me this wonderful gift. And then I went to an all dumpling dinner with a friend, at which inexplicably and for reasons unrelated to the dumplings, I fainted. And when I came to, I said, would you like a drink? This seems stressful for you because now you have to take me to the hospital. And she was like, no, well, maybe. So she had a sip of it. And then later when I was in the ER and the ER doctor was asking me questions, I opened my bag to get out like some paperwork, and he just saw this gigantic bottle of liqueur. And he's like, oh, you're probably just wasted. Like I'm no longer confused about what happened here.
Is it good?
This bottle has history. It's very herbal. It has a very herbal sort of medicinal flavor.
Bill, you look like you're in the set of Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets.
Yeah. So during quarantine, my housemate Micah usually builds the stages for Jazz Fest here in New Orleans, but Jazz Fest got canceled, so he turned our basement into a bar. So we have a grand piano over here. Here, I'll take you on a little tour. There's like a little makeout zone over there. There's like a little hang booth here, and then I'm sitting at the actual bar here.
I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
I truly thought it was a background that you had put up on your
No.
site.
It's yeah. So
That's beautiful and
that was his project
professional.
for quarantine.
I'm going to join Bill at the bar.
Yeah, it's great.
Nice.
Trust
The
any-
bar is called Futility's End, which Bill and I both thought was just overly poetic at the beginning of all this, and now is absolutely apropos.
Now you sometimes just lie there with your head on the bar that you've built in your basement.
Utilities end.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, could you guys say a little bit about Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets? I know it's difficult to describe, which is why we've avoided it and left it to you, but it's like
Sure.
I think such a culmination of the work that you've done over the past few years, and knowing you and being your friend, it was so reflective of like your concerns and your personalities. It like felt, you know, speaking of things we do to feel like we're with people when we can't be with them, watching it made me feel like I was with you, and I think it's a really special movie.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, Turner, you're great at elevator pitches.
You know, the funny thing about this one, though, is that nobody wanted to buy that elevator pitch.
Nobody was
And,
getting in the
it's
elevator.
it's not much different than it ended up being. It's a story about the last night at a dive bar on the outskirts of Las Vegas in the shadows of the bright lights. A bunch of people get together
but
to
how
celebrate.
did you make it, sir? How did you make it?
Oh, Bill, you're so good at explaining that. Why don't you do that?
No. That's why I asked you.
So it's a mini tiered thing. So the film itself, you know, as you digest it, is the last night of a bar on the outskirts of Vegas, and it's like Cheers. You know, these people come in, everybody knows their name. You have that experience. We shot it in the way that we have sort of learned to shoot our films, and so it reads very much as a verite film. But like all of our films, it's also a massive construction. And so while the framing device of Las Vegas was key to us in terms of a backdropping metaphor, we knew the space needed to be more of a stage than an actuality of a space. Rather than going and spending a year in a dive bar hoping to catch big fish, we knew that we wanted to have some authorship of the space and also create a safe space in which we could bring these people together, these archetypes and their space, and just have them exist within that time together, and that we would be available to it. So it was primarily shot over the course of just a few days, with the main shoot being an 18-hour unbroken 2-camera shoot, closed set, never broke the spell. These people, you know, as the first person moved in, well, that person had ownership of the place. When the second person came in, they started a story. When the third person came in, those two people already had created a dynamic, and it continued that way throughout the evening, in so much as they, you know, weren't necessarily as acquainted as they were. That paradigm allowed them to gravitate towards each other and what was happening, and respond to the stimuli, and in real time build their own narrative.
What was it about? I mean, I think there are people who are like dive bar connoisseurs, and my time spent with you would suggest that you're among them. But what was it about the dive bar that you felt like would bring the, you know, emotional or interpersonal relationships to, you know, to a valuable point, or to a kind of like valuable experience? Why the dive bar?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. The idea of the dive bar was brought to our attention at a very early age. When our uncle would babysit us, he would just take us to the bar and put us at the end of the bar. So as like little kids, we would just sit there and watch these larger than life characters tell these incredible stories that we believed every word, of course. And we were just like, my God, like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is not what real life looks like. So we would just sit there and, you know, drink Shirley Temples or whatever, and just like watch all this stuff happen. So we were always fascinated, you know, like when I'd be on the bus going to school, we'd go past the bar and I'd be like, oh, I know there's wild things happening there. So, there, you know, there's always been a fascination with it. But yeah, and then the other part to it, I think, was this fascination of the outskirts of Vegas. When we'd be on road trips, you know, we always hated Vegas, but like the outskirts where like actual people were living, was, you know, in the shadow of all that was very fascinating. We'd stop in places like that. And it is a place where, as we all know, you can be who you are or be somebody else, or it is a stage. So, and we shot the film at the end of 2016 when, you know, it was very polarized and people weren't talking to each other. They were only talking online, it seemed like. And it seemed like a place where we knew that people could disagree, but still sit next to each other. And that seemed like a pretty good place to talk about what was going on
Mhm. It's interesting that you bring up talking online because, you know, I have a Twitter account. I'll admit it, like many people. And you go there and you feel that people are having these conversations with each other, and they go to that space to have conversations with each other. But it feels it's a less substantial than what you see in your film, I think, even though it is a construction, even though you have sort of cast these people and brought them together for the purposes of making a film, it still feels less real in a certain way, to use a charged word.
Well, how do you mean?
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, T. Go ahead.
And that's what we wanted was a hyper realism, a kinetic realism, something that was more, you know, that had authenticity to it, rather than, you know, being just the direct artifact of an experience. And yeah, and for us, like Bill was saying, it's one of those spaces through all of our time together that we've used as a resource. You walk into a place like that, you can usually find somebody who knows something about where you are, what's going on. You can engage in a conversation. You can get a feel for what's going on. And at that specific time, we knew not only that we wanted to make this film that is about the, you know, sort of a portrait of places that we deeply have deep empathy for, let's say, and have had experience in, but also that it would be conducive to conversation in a time when people were feeling very raw and very confused. And if we built that, the hope there was that they would, that they would interact with each other in soulful ways. Part of that was, I mean, a huge part of that was casting, bringing together very specific archetypes so that every single person in that bar belongs there for a reason. And we had those conversations with each of them before we started shooting, just saying, you know, we're here because we love you. We're here because you are fully yourself, and you're going to be the only you in this space. And so, you know, whatever space you take over, that's yours to inhabit. And, you know, we hoped there that there would be some alchemy between those people, but also didn't know necessarily if it would work. But it certainly, you know, it certainly did. And as the night wore on, not only those sort of petty alliances and little love affairs continued, but also, you know, deep trauma people shared, and really found it to be a place of commiseration and catharsis, and, you know, the myriad feelings that we get from spaces like that.
And I think it's not just the dive bar of it all, but also this like category of film that's like the last day of, like the closing day of something, and like how that emotionally charges a space as well. And it felt, I don't know, and I'm not interested in having you explain like what's real or scripted or whatever, but like it did feel as though the people in the film were imbued with that feeling that like, this is it, this is our time to sort of discuss what we can now, even if that was a fictional bar, fictional idea.
It's a simple conceit so that everybody has something to hang their hat on. This is basic. We know when the dawn comes, this is it, and this place that we love will be gone forever. So this is the only thing. It's a conceit used all the time, but it also then spoke to those broader themes, like in Beatrice's lovely piece of writing. She mentions the last picture show. You know, it's that just simple framing device of saying, okay, we are at the end of something. We know already, you know, by establishing that up front, that we feel a sense of impending loss, that we know that there's an end to whatever this is. And I think that helped us. I mean, not only is that a metaphor to extrapolate, but as an actual practical experience with the participants, that they knew, okay, I can make sense of this, and now I can go within that.
I actually think that there's a corollary there with like the process of making a documentary too, where like you see time and again that people who might be a little bit reluctant to talk about their lives, when they get to a place where they feel like, but this is, you know, we'll only be making this movie together for so long, or I have this one interview, I have this 1 hour with you, and if I want to say something, or there's something I've been wanting to express, like this is it. And, you know, the film is just like so saturated with that feeling. This is it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that's absolutely true. Yeah, a lot of people brought a whole lot of things that they wanted to express. But yeah, there's a time portion to it. That it's like, this is my, I have this amount of time to say what I want to say. Yeah, that's right on.
What were the qualities that you wanted the bar to have, like physically, or if it was like a vibe? Like what were you thinking? This is how the bar needs to be.
Well, because it was the idea, we were very set on that it should be on the outskirts of Vegas. We wanted the inside of it to like almost be like womb-like we're escaping, this harsh sun, these neon lights, to hide away in this sort of dark space. And we scouted a ton. I think every dive bar on the outskirts of Vegas over the years, and a lot of the places had that quality to it. So that's it needed to like be this like cozy, dark, like hideout.
I want to say I really liked your curation of the movies you put on the TV that was playing the whole time.
Yeah,
that was amazing. And I actually watched this with my significant other, who didn't know anything about the film, and I didn't tell him anything about it, which was a really nice experiment for me, because like I knew about what you had done to construct it before watching it. And like halfway through the movie, he's like, man, if it's only one day, like how come they're getting through so many movies? Because like he noticed that there were different movies playing each time. And anyways, so, like
I hadn't thought about that either.
Yeah. And at the end, the movie finished, and I looked at him, and I was like, all right, do you want to know the twist? And he like looked at me strange, and I was like, okay, well, I told him. And he like just kind of looked at me and was like, I knew it was like too real. So like I think you really achieved that hyper reality in a really beautiful way, and I think that really came across to people that like didn't even know what was going on.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Beatrice, do you have a favorite dive bar, and what do you love about it?
I used to, but it closed down. It was in this neighborhood in DC, Adams Morgan, and I used to go to it back when I lived in like the old rundown house. And the best
What were you calling the house? The beach house?
Yeah, the beach house. That's
a great. Okay. I used to live in the red house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the best bars in DC, I think, they're not like bars with permits. They're like these little speakeasy type places that are above restaurants, usually Ethiopian restaurants. So my friend had a bar above one of these Ethiopian restaurants in Adams Morgan. And it was a great place, and it also showed like interesting movies on the TV. And I just like knew the people that showed up, and they were all pretty weird and like people I wouldn't interact with normally, just like being like a writer and like in the movie business. But it's interesting because like all of that kind of corresponds to me and being a younger person, and I was also single, and I was also just like a little more unhinged and like not that serious with my writing and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to go there all the time, and like right around the time it closed is when I like kind of coupled up with my boyfriend, and we like moved in together, and it was like all signaling the end of just like a whole phase, not just for me, but I'm sure other people as well.
Well, Mike, you found your significant other by a dive bar date.
That's true. Our first date was at a dive bar, and it's
where I was a cocktail waitress at a different time.
Coincidentally at a different time, years later, right? It wasn't like that night on our first date you were like coming over giving us an amazing story that I'm going to start now as being the truth. I just came up with a really good origin tale. But yeah, that place called Soda Bar is actually down on Vanderbilt, and not too far from where we live now, where we all live actually in Brooklyn. And I'm just terrified that it's not going to make it through COVID. It's a really big space. It takes up a lot of real estate. And way before this ever happened, we would constantly talk about how we were a little nervous about whether they could continue to be paying their rent. I mean, who knows? It's just that everything closes in New York. Everything closes because they can't pay rent. And now they're kind of hanging on by a thread, perhaps. We'd be very, very sad. It would mean, obviously, it has a lot of personal baggage for us, but also just generally for the neighborhood, to see these independent dive bars close one by one. It's been rough, and it's going to get worse. So sorry, that was really negative. One thing that I was thinking,
True though.
I promised not to, it's true, of course, but I promised not to be too negative. But while Beatrice was talking, you were talking about, seeing some weird people, or people that you, not weird in a negative way, but people you wouldn't necessarily talk to, that you talk to because you're out and about and you're at a bar. And that's one thing that I'm certainly missing during all this is, rather than seeing the same 3 people all the time, it would be awfully nice to interact with some strangers. I'm really missing it. Actually.
Yeah, like that, though, like, who knows what's gonna happen feeling.
Exactly. Yeah, our uncle, like I said, would take us out, and being little kids, we'd be like, oh, I don't know about that guy. And he would say, well, guys, in life, there are all-stars, luminaries, and notables, and you should talk to them all, which I'm pretty sure just paved the way for our documentary career.
I think that sounds right.
It's just curiosity about everything. There's actually something else in your movie that made me think of completely coincidentally made me think of another movie I was already thinking about in terms of this theme, which was the great musical moment where the bartender sings Roy Orbison's Crying.
I love that.
Which is, what a beautiful performance, first of all, and just one of my favorite songs ever. But it made me think of Mulholland Drive, of course. With Rebecca Del Rio, who sings the song in Spanish in the Club Silencio sequence. And I was actually thinking, when I think about like bars and places where everyone knows your name, I think of Club Silencio, even though it's like a nightmare place where they're actually strangers and they don't really know anyone. I think that is like my ideal bar or theater situation.
This is so much about you. It's like,
yeah, this is very telling.
Like, even my dream bar is a nightmare.
I want to go there at like 3 a.m. I want nobody to know my name, and I want to see some weird fucking shit.
I always want to see some weird fucking shit.
Absolutely.
What were other films that you referenced or talked about, spaces that you noticed in other films that you came back to during the making of this one?
So I wrote a list because I assume this would probably come up, but I'll try to
wrap. Drop it in the chat too if you want to.
I'll read them off and then I'll drop it. The Exiles, Eggleston, Stranded Canton, On the Bowery, Stranger in the Paradise, Dusty and Sweets McGee, Varda's Lions, Love and Lies, Black Cat, White Cat, Last Night in the Alamo, Killer Sheep, Poem is a Naked Person, Welfare by Wiseman, Go Away USA by Denis, The Belovs by Kazakowski, Wanda by Barbara Loden, and Husbands.
Oh, wow.
Kurt, would you like to talk about non-movie influences?
Well, yes. Luke Vinson wants to know if The Iceman Cometh was part of this. And when I was 9 years old, when I was 9 years old, I saw, we were visiting our young freewheeling aunt in New York, there we all are. And she got tickets to The Iceman Cometh on Broadway with Kevin Spacey as the lead and Tony Danza as the bartender.
That is dark.
And I mean, as a 9-year-old kid watching a 4.5 hour stage play about people drinking in a bar, I didn't realize then that it would have so much resonance with me. And I realized that, especially in that theatrical space, that there was so much more going on than just what was on the surface. It's not just a bunch of down and out folks drinking. It's their lives and their pipe dreams and their hopes and their failings and their fears and the world outside and the safe haven inside. And I mean, that has stuck with me always. And this was as close as we've gotten to sort of channeling some of that.
Also, have you both seen, I assume you have, John Huston's Fat City?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, sorry, that should be on the list too. There's a bunch.
I think we stole our titles from Fat City.
Oh yeah, our titles are totally ripped from Fat City. Yeah, I should have put that in there too.
Bill, I know that it's tonally extremely different, but I remember talking about and perhaps making you watch Thank God It's Friday.
Oh, I mean,
after I watched the first cut of the movie.
Yes.
Another sort of like one crazy night, like who knows what can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, when these people get together in this space and it's just like a powder keg.
That is quite a picture. I'm sure that'll influence something of ours down the line, most certainly.
It's disco, bloody nose, empty pocket.
Indeed.
It would be wrong of me not to mention a film, and Eric, you'll probably, because I've mentioned this film before, and it was actually the visual illustration for Reverse Shot Happy Hour from the very beginning, but I don't think we've ever actually talked about it, but you'll make fun of me because it seems like I only know like 3 movies. But Distant Voices Still Lives, the Terrence Davies film, does have my all-time favorite pub scenes.
All right,
so the second half of the movie is.
We just watched that this week, weirdly. It's a masterpiece, and I had never heard of it until this past week.
Oh my God! Well, congratulations. This is like a big week for you. This is like the best possible.
Yeah, fantastic. We also watched Spring Night, Summer Night. Is that the title? T. Also, bar stuff in there. We just watched that this week too. So obviously you can't see everything leading up to the thing you're trying to pull off, but it's nice to see.
Well, like seeing Eagle Purnell's Last Night at the Alamo, we didn't see it until after we'd shot the film, and then it was like, oh, wow, revelatory.
Yeah.
Well, or I like to think of those films as like being in the same family as your film, this like resonance that you didn't know existed. And there's examples like that have come up for Jeff, Michael, and I with the last film that we made together, which is called Feast of the Epiphany. And we interestingly were also kind of like trying to make a hybrid film in a sort of unique way, I guess. But yeah, people would bring up the SAS film in which Kristen Stewart is haunted by her
Personal Shopper
brother. Yeah, Personal Shopper. Other films about grief, and we're like, no, that came out after, or we hadn't seen it yet. But like now you exist in this like constellation in a way because of being concerned with the same things.
Welcome, Eric.
Hello.
Yeah, what are you creeping on us down there? What's going on?
Sidled up.
Where's your basement bar, Eric?
My favorite bar?
Oh, I said, where's your basement bar?
I don't have a basement bar. I don't have a basement. Come on.
Get out.
No, but hearing about your being taken to taverns as a kid, Bill, like I thought of this place in Elizabeth, New Jersey called the 640 Club, which I just looked up still exists. Nice. Which is at a neighborhood place in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And it was one of these places that's like perfect setup where there's the long bar, and then there's like the family style, the dinner room in the back. And so on Sundays, we would drive from Staten Island to Elizabeth, New Jersey, go to the back room, have dinner. And my brother and I, we were not kids who grew up in bars all the time necessarily, but it's one of the few times that we spent a lot of time there, because though we were eating in that back room, the front room, of course, was inevitably playing some sport that we wanted to watch.
Right.
And so my brother and I,
like a Mets game.
It was sort of like sidle on the other side. And we couldn't tell if we were supposed to be there or not. And the more we invested in the game we would get, the more we basically sort of like would just be hanging out at the bar. And, and like sort of like forgetting ourselves, and all of a sudden just being in that space was actually thrilling because it was
it's an illegal space. Yeah.
So like distinctly remember a lot of actual details about baseball games in the 640 Club. So yeah, it sort of primed me without my realizing it.
I think our greatest memory at the bar that we would go to was it's called Scudsy's, and our greatest memory was our Uncle Dave took us to see SummerSlam, the WWE wrestling event, and Macho Man married Miss Elizabeth, and my uncle brought a wedding cake, and we drank Coca-Cola and ate wedding cake and watched wrestling all day, and it was kind of the greatest thing of all time.
Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth are two of the most famous Staten Islanders, according to me, because they lived on Staten Island when I was a kid.
Oh, wow. Little known fact, Macho Man played for the Cincinnati Reds AAA team. Tying it all together here, baseball, wrestling.
I don't know Macho Man, but I have.
Slim Jim, bro.
That's a Slim Jim. You've seen the commercials.
Oh, that's him. So wait, sorry, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but who's Randy Savage? Who's Randy Savage?
The same guy.
Macho Man.
Michael.
That is him, right? Why you just said a different name? You said Macho Man.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but you just said something else. I thought it was.
It's Elizabeth, who is his partner.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. They married. They're the ones that got married. Got
Indeed.
it. Okay,
Right.
so I have a question for everybody that's completely different.
Didn't see this going there.
It's actually it's an extremely important question for today's episode, and I want an answer from every person. And it's easy because it's like a single word or maybe 2-word answer. Kirstie Alley or Shelley Long? And you have to pick.
Shelley Long.
Kirstie Alley.
Shelley Long.
Shelley Long.
Wait,
I prefer Shelley Long up at the in the first
Dividable,
those first few
underlined.
seasons. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
only
what would you
Farihah.
say?
I just wanted to be
Beatrice and
iconoclastic.
Farihah both said Kirstie Alley, which is interesting.
Okay.
Right? Did you both say Kirstie Alley?
Yeah, I found her to be. I think I felt like the assertiveness of her energy was less uptight than Shelley Long's characters.
Well, that's true.
So I think it's like a connection with the construction of that character and seeing like an assertive woman in a place of business as opposed to necessarily how she functioned in the show, which I know perhaps not as good. Not the chemistry wasn't as good.
See, I ask because we've been watching Cheers. My husband and I have been watching Cheers in order, and we've been doing this for a while now, but we're back in it really because of quarantine. And we actually just crossed the border from Shelley Long to Kirstie Alley. So we're like season 6, I believe. And I need to get used to it. That's all I'll say.
You're grieving the loss of a,
Of a great comic talent.
of a couple
Great.
that you grew attached to.
Yeah.
Mason Shelley Long.
Can
So,
I?
But she was also a hard character to get to know in the original episode. So she has to earn her way into your heart and into that show. And then by the time she's gone, it's just you've gone through so much with these people. I don't know.
It's true. I'm already getting used to Woody. I mean, I've gotten used to Woody. I love Woody.
Yeah.
But that took a little while too. Anyway, I just killed the conversation, but it is 6.
No, I was actually just like zoning out thinking about I have 2 favorite New York dive bars, and I'm thinking about the particular friendship of like the other regular, and you're both regulars and the bartenders like refer to you as such, and I only see those people in this context and I really miss them, but it just never occurred to me to like build a relationship outside of that. That's where it lives. At Karaoke 17 or whatever example you want to use.
Mhm.
Yeah, I will speak. I just do want to speak for all the people out there for whom walking into a bar and everyone knowing your name is an actual nightmare.
Well, and I think,
kind of like
I think it's interesting that our discussion about the dive bar has actually never been about the alcohol, because it's actually just like a stand-in for a place that you need to go and be among other people and feel like there's like possibility of surprise and opportunity. And I think like what you're describing, Michael, I don't always go to talk to people. I also sometimes go to my favorite dive bar to experience anonymity, which I think Bill or Turner, one of you brought up too. Like I like the feeling, there's actually a feeling of agency that because you're not with your closest friends or your family necessarily, you can just choose your adventure for the evening.
Yeah. And alcohol's, it's kind of like the campfire that, that people are sitting around, just like sports or church are. It's a reason to be, we are learning that we are very social people in this moment. And so we need humans around us, and we need touch, and we need all that stuff. And so it's.
Sometimes you need to go be together and not talk.
Goddamn right.
Well, that's actually really hard, right? I mean, we gather this way. It's energy to talk, to be present in a really verbal way the entire time. And you lose that opportunity just to spend a couple hours in a bar next to a friend, and you're not talking the entire time. Sometimes you're listening to the music. Sometimes your attention gets distracted, and that's just a wonderful way of hanging out. We just really can't do that right now.
Sometimes you're really nosy about other people's conversations, and that's why you watch Bloody Nose Empty Pockets, because you want to hear in on what's going on.
I mean, though we could have a Zoom call where we all get on and just we don't say anything to each other.
This is what I'm saying. Maybe we should try right now.
I want to tell you that I've tried this, and it's not I have not been successful. Maybe I had to tell my little sister that I don't, in fact, want to watch her cook or do her skincare regimen.
Right. Not everybody is going to deal with it.
I have also had that conversation.
And by which I mean
Not
I
with-
tried this, I don't mean intentionally. Nobody told me that we were going to be doing this. It just happened. And I was like, no, that's not what we're doing in this space. Good night.
Well, we should do our own cheers.
Yeah.
What should we toast to this week?
Well, while you think about it, I'm going to do my traditional and shout out the reverse shotters in the audience that are listening in. Chris Wisniewski, Jordan Kronk, Ryan Swen, Caden Mark Gardner, and I wrote Ryan Swen down twice. So Ryan, you're doubly acknowledged.
I think we should toast to our regulars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of you, thank you for being here. I hope everybody sees Bloody Nose Empty Pockets. It's really fantastic. And I hope everybody reads Beatrice's writing
And comes back next week. Yeah. And,
like every week.
Yeah.
Hang
it
out.
doesn't go crazy.
We know your names.
We can literally see them in the chat.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Everybody.
Thanks for joining us.